Hey BookTube, I'm back for another video. There's a new BookTube event, and I want to celebrate it with my own video. The videos have been going around for the new BookTube event about Short Story Summer, I believe it's what it's called. It's hosted by Randy Ray, and it's where you read short stories in the month of August. And I like reading short stories, but I have a contentious relationship with them, I think, because I've read a lot of short stories that are just bad or just plain meh or lukewarm or just average, and I don't seem to be able to read through an entire collection systematically. Not necessarily reading it like a book from cover to cover, but staying consistent with reading a short story collection just from front to back. And there's only been one collection ever that I've ever done that with, and that was this volume. This Ray Bradbury volume of 100 short stories of his, selected by Ray Bradbury himself. And I had this as an e-copy, and I had it on my iPod back when I was a teenager, and I would just occasionally read one of the short stories, and I just went sequentially all the way through. And I was like, when there was a pause in my life where I had time to read a short story, that's what I would do. But ever since then, I've been a complete failure in terms of being consistent with reading short story collections. So there's many short story collections that I have, but I've never read them entirely. There's always at least a couple of short stories that I have not read from every volume. But anyways, we're going to get to my top 5 favorite short stories in no particular order. I just saw that Aaron Facer did this video. He's not a host, and I'm not a host either, but it looks like fun to talk about your favorite 5 short stories, and it gave me a lot of thought. Because when I think of short stories, I've only think of the few that I've enjoyed the most, but I've never given it a thought of what my actual favorites were, and so it was nice to clarify that in my mind. So the first one I'm going to talk about is going to be the only one that I don't have a prompt for, or like a physical book to show to you, and it's from the collection of Flannery O'Connor, her collected short stories. I do have a volume here. I do have a volume, but it's not here, and it's her short story, "Good Country People." And I love Flannery O'Connor. I could have named a number of her short stories for this list, but I chose one, and I chose the one that really stuck out to me the most. And The Good Country People is just such a characteristically Flannery O'Connor short story, where you don't know where she's going with the story until she does like a twist at the end that, or like subverts your expectation in the end, but not in like an obvious way, more in like a kind of like a subtle and kind of almost not gross, but very uncomfortable way. And the whole point is to expose the folly of the characters in her story. Because in a Flannery O'Connor short story, no one is innocent. Everyone is, I guess, guilty in their own way. And the happenings of the short story just expose everyone for what they are. And this short story is no different. It's the story, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's the story of um, a mother and her adult daughter. Her adult daughter lives at home, and it's just the two of them, but they live in the country. But the adult daughter hates living in the country because she went off to school to get an education, and she got a doctorate in philosophy. And so she's very uptight and pretentious, and she hates living in the country. She hates her upbringing. She hates her family. And she would not live with her mother except for the fact that she's sick. She cannot take care of herself, really, and she's also disabled. She's got a fake leg, so she cannot take care of herself, and so she's dependent on her mother for her living. But she doesn't do any help or any work, and she doesn't do anything to help her mother in the house. All she does is just read her philosophy and scorn at people all the day, every day. And the story is about how a good young country boy comes to the door and tries to sell some Bibles, and the mother is very patronizing, but very kind of like gleefully uh, blissful to, this good country boy, and she's praising him and invites him to the home and really starts talking to him, and but then he meets this disagreeable daughter, and um, I guess takes a liking to her because he's invited over for supper, and so she has to deal with him over supper, and things move from there, where she thinks he's going to try and manipulate him, and things become twisted, and it rises to a grand climax uh, where something happens that you don't expect to happen, uh, and it's just so odd, and it left such a weird taste in my mouth, which is what Flannery Connor short stories always seem to do. Is they just leave such a gross taste in your mouth, but yet you know that it's brilliant, and I've come to really like that feeling that she invokes in her stories. Um, so I do strongly recommend that one. And then, so now going back into some of my prompts, uh, we're gonna go to a classic favorite of mine. I held up this volume of Bradbury short stories, but I could name a number from here as some of my favorites, but none of them made this list. Instead, the Ray Bradbury short story that I do want to talk about is from this collection here, A Sound of Summer Running, or no, A Sound of Thunder and Other Short Stories, not the summer short story that he has, but this is a collection of short stories that I guess is just collects a number of just random stories that are from either his more famous collections, like The Illustrated Man and Martian Chronicles, but there's also some lesser known, or at least lesser known in my understanding of things. Like, I don't hear people talking about some of these short stories, but the one that I wanted to mention here is The Murderer. So not the title short story, which is probably his most famous one, but The Murderer. And the short story is not as ominous as it sounds, because this short story is just about a future world in where distraction is the norm, where everyone is listening to music, everyone has got a cell phone watch where they're always calling people and talking to people, and there's always distraction everywhere. And this one character is just fed up with it all, and so he makes a systematic effort to destroy all the distraction around him, whether or not they're his own or other people around him. So he basically has to force everyone around him to be silent, but he does it in very clever ways, and so he's destroying all this technology wherever he goes, and he ends up being arrested and brought in for questioning why he does this. And he gives his explanation why basically something snapped in his mind, and he's starting to destroy all this, like TV and music or radio, at least for the time, and he craves silence, and that's what he wants, and yet his craving for silence is enough to consider him insane in this futuristic world, and I love it. I love it. It recalls some of my favorite scenes from Fahrenheit 451 from his novel. If you've read the novel, you'll know which scenes I'm talking about. Like what the dentifrice commercial that's on the bus when Guy Montag is on the bus and he's trying to read the Bible. He's reading a book in public, and there's an advertisement on the bus, and everyone's bobbing along to it, and he's being distracted from it, and it enrages him. Anyways, that's a digression. We're gonna move on to another childhood favorite short story, and I've read this a number of times, and I don't think it holds up as like a critical masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just a short story I love so much. And it's the wonderful story of Henry Sugar by Roald Dahl. And it's this wonderful, charming story of this rich, disagreeable man whose wealth is purely through hereditary means. So he's never worked a day in his life. He's just inherited this enormous wealth, and he's friends with a huge group of wealthy men who are in the same boat of him. They've never worked a day in their life, and they all just leech off of their own inheritance, and they like to get together occasionally for a game of cards. And Henry Sugar is at one of his friends' mansions, and they're playing cards. And they decide to play a certain game of cards. I forget which one, but it requires a certain amount of people, and that means they have an odd person out. Um, and Henry Sugar ends up being that person who has to set out that one game, and he's grumpy about it. So he just wanders around the mansion, and he goes into the library and sees this enormous collection of rare and like old books, and he's just wandering around. He doesn't read because he's the type that doesn't who tries to distract himself through cheap pleasures like gambling and whatnot. And he comes across this really old book, which is an account by a doctor about this man who can see without his eyes. And Henry Sugar is intrigued by this, and so he reads the account, and it's a short account, and it's given in entirety in the short story about this man who proved that he could. And this illustration here is from a short story where the doctor wraps up this guy's entire head to the point where it's impossible for him to be able to see. And he proves that he can still see by riding this bicycle, and he rides it perfectly normal, as if his eyes were not covered at all. And he says that there's a deep meditative, intensive meditative process in which he learned to see through other means than just his eyes, and then the doctor kind of actually describes describes his process, because I believe this man gives his story of how he searched up this yogi guru who told him how to meditate properly in order to have this ability. And Henry Sugar is very intrigued and decides to give this meditative practice a try, and he ends up succeeding and becomes sort of like a Robin Hood type hero. And I love this short story. It's not well written in any way. The story has leaps in logic that will stand out like a sore thumb, but I love it. It's so revisitable, and something that makes me so happy every time I read it. I have two more short stories here, and I don't know which order I should do them in, because I'm not really doing them in rankings. I guess I'll do a relatively new find for me. It's the works of Shirley Hazard. This is her short story collection here. It's called Collected Stories, and it's got the two published short story collections that she published in her time, and then the rest are unpublished short stories that are appearing here first time in a volume. And this was a new find for me. I've only been reading her short stories for maybe the past year and a half, but I've adored her short stories. And my favorite here, let's see if I remember the title, is A Place in the Country. Yes, that's the short story that I want to talk about. There's many I could talk. There's at least 3 or 4 in here I could talk about, but A Place in the Country is one of her longer ones, and it's about this young woman who goes off to the country place of her cousin. Her cousin is an older woman who's, I guess, early middle-aged woman who's married to this man, and she's got a child. And she goes and she's invited to their place, their country house, for a while, for the summer, I guess. And she ends up, and that her cousin's husband ends up, I guess, seducing her to a degree. But all of this you have to infer, because it's not obviously laid out. It's very intelligently done, where it's little pieces are given to you along the way as you build up to, as you basically are dropped into this relationship between all these people in this country house, where the cousin, the woman, she's naive, about this, and then you got the more domineering husband who's having an affair behind her back, and then you got this young woman who's not experienced at all in the realms of relationships and love, and she's just as confused as she is enticed, and it leads to a lot of suffering in her own personal life, and it leads to very it leads to a tragic end, but not tragic in like a blown out kind of way where there's like a physical tragedy or anything. It's more just emotional tragedy at the very end. And the very end, the very last scene too is just it'll leave your skin crawling a little bit. It's so well done, so well evoked, and just the tensions in the story of this woman who's totally unexperienced in love, and this middle-aged man who's like sort of domineering, but not in a characteristically obvious sense, and yeah, it's just so well done. And she also has a sequel short story called The Picnic, which is after the affair had been realized, and basically the cousin and the young woman are estranged for a long time. After 10 years, they get back together, and they have a picnic, and the cousin leaves the young woman with her husband on the picnic blanket, and goes off to go play with her son, intentionally leaving them alone, just to show that she does not care that they once had an affair, that she's beyond that, and that they have moved on. But as this man and this young woman, who's no longer, I guess, as young as she used to be, because it's 10 years in the future, they're sitting down, and we just jump from head to head as they have these thoughts about one another, and how the affair had played out, how it ended, and how life had been since they had that affair. And they just present two very different worlds, and it's just so intelligently done. I love it. I'm saying that a lot when I'm talking about Shirley Hazard, but she's so subtle. She knows she can explore the emotional life of characters so well, and her men are usually not very good characters, and her women are usually not her women are usually intelligent, but yet emotionally I guess confused, and I don't know, she's so thoughtful in how she explores these relationships in such subtle and gorgeous prose, and I really do love Shirley Hazard. So I'm putting A Place in the Country and The Picnic as like one story but told in two parts kind of thing. So I'm going to include that there. So I'm including that as one story, and then my final story is going to be from The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. It's from this collection. It's not the title story itself. I have read it, and it was okay. It was all right. But the short story I do want to highlight is one that I deeply love, and it's The Lady of the House of Love. And it's just a 20-page short story of a vampire. This woman, she's a vampire in this typical vampire house in this abandoned village, broader village. And the story is set off by this young soldier, or this young man, who rides up to the place in a bicycle, and he's just exploring this place, and he ends up inside the vampire's house, and she, of course, entices him and draws him in, and her purpose is to, of course, end up killing him, but throughout the whole story, she's fighting against her own heritage, because she needs blood, and she hasn't had blood for a while, but she has like this dilemma, because she ends up liking this young man, and she doesn't want to end up actually killing him, and it's like this tension between her own deep vampire heritage of, she's been living for over a couple hundred years, and she's got these portraits of her ancestors all along the walls, and it's dark, and it's, typical vampire type lair, but she's almost pulling against her own deep vampire lore, and this young man with his, neat uniform and his bicycle represent the technological modern age, infringing on this old like fantasy historic past, and the way they clash, and the way the vampire woman has to reconsider uh, her own history, and I love it. It's so much fun, and but also like a very different take on a vampire type tale. It's not a traditional type vampire tale, and it's not just meant to shock you. It's a thoughtful tale, and I really do enjoy it. And so that's what I would consider one of my favorite short stories at this moment. So I think I'll leave it there. BookTube. That's 5 stories, maybe 6 if you consider the two-parter that I talked about with Shirley Hazard. And I recommend that you seek these stories out and give them a read, see what you think. And I'll leave it there. Thanks, BookTube.